of the hour. So welcome to everyone who's just joined us. We're going to be talking this week on 5 ways to tune up your call center. So I think there'll be a little bit of something for everyone in the audience. We'll be looking at a range of different techniques you can tune up the call center. So I'd like to introduce you our panelists today, which is Martin Hill-Wilson from Brain Food Training. So I'd like to say hello to the camera there, and Mark Dunn from New Voice Media.
Hello everybody, good afternoon.
Martin is a regular on our webinars, probably done about a dozen sessions, and Mark is sort of first time as a headline act. There has attended, I think, 3 years ago on a webinar we did, which was very memorable, on PCI compliance.
I'm sure we've got some people tuning in again from that one.
So the world on PCI has probably changed quite a bit over 3 years. I think there's probably more people PCI compliant.
Yeah, significantly, yeah. So we've got a lot more customers using, that are more concerned about PCI. I think legislation is certainly catching up from kind of pushing into fines and making contact centers and businesses more aware of the risks of carrying cardholder data. So yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to be doing, as ever, top tips and questions. But before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping, which is the slides available for download on the website. Leave tips and questions in the chat room.
Yes.
And a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates is going to be for the best tip on how you can tune up your call center. If you want to watch the replay, that will be available later on today, and a white paper will be sent to you via New Voice Media.
Serialized on Netflix.
I see Martin can't win the chocolates and champagne, I see.
I wish.
So in the chat room, and we've got Emma will be joining us on the chat room as well today. Just a reminder, no commercial messages, web addresses or emails, only through direct messages. Keep it nice and polite. Once you're logged into the chat room, here's the address, callcenterhelper.com/chat. In fact, here's an example of what it looks like. So we've got all our audience who are dialed in, all down on the right-hand side, and you just put your message in there, very straightforward. And you can download the webinar slides, just this little link here on the right-hand side. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to for everyone to log into the chat room, and I would like to ask the question to you. In 1 or 2 words, what was the last thing that you tried to do to improve your contact center? So in 1 or 2 words, what was the last thing that you did to try and improve your call center? If you can type that into the chat room now. We've got Guy, Matthew, Faye talking away. Guy has said gamification. We've got Chris, Vinay, Joel, Joey typing in. Joey said last thing we did was track minutes on cases, which I think is quite interesting. I don't know if that's minutes as in the elapsed time.
How long
Matthew
it takes, yeah.
says team building to motivate staff and bring back the fun factor. So I think that's a great one to do. Polly, processes and up training. Miguel says agent inquiries. Faye has said personality-based servicing. That's a great one. I've seen that. Don't see it very often. I think the first time I came across that was at British Gas, where they had sort of personality profiles. Vinay says we changed the CRM tool, invested on more remote control tools. Jay said recognition program effectiveness. Chris said we shifted from AHT focus to first contact resolution.
Great.
So that's quite a nice one. Focus groups to hear agent issues. I always laugh when I hear focus groups, because that's often the one thing a focus group does is not to focus. Scott says we extended lunch by from 30 minutes to an hour. So I guess give people a real good chance to de-stress during the lunch hour. It helps if you're in a nice area, people can actually get out of the building in. Chris says publish productivity stats for everyone to see. Heather says dedicated coaches to target improvement of varying metrics, soft skills. Faye has also said they've changed their CRM system. I know you work very closely with Salesforce, which is, I guess, the CRM system. Publish stats for everyone to see. Focus on the customer rather than specific performance measures. We've got loads coming through. And Craig has said a phone upgrade, video calls, which is quite interesting. We're doing a little bit of video today, and now reviewing the CRM system. So that's some
snapshot.
fascinating feedback of what people have done to try and tune up their contact centers. So I'm now going to pass the baton across to Martin. With that, I'm going to turn off the video camera and change the baton across to Martin, and we will, Martin, if you could take us through what are the 5 ways to tune up a contact center that you've identified.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. So these slides, as Jonty said, are going to be available to you later on, but I'd like to talk you through them, and also Mark's going to contribute and get involved as and when the muse takes him. I'm sure Emma will as well, and Jonty will as well. So this is just really a way to organise, I suppose, 5 conversations and things that we can look at. Actually, before we get there, let's just track back and make sure we've done a good job at saying who our hosts are for the day. So, Mark, do you want to give us the overview of who you guys are and what you're up to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for those that don't know, New Voice Media, we've been delivering cloud-based contact center solutions to multi-sized organizations, really, so operations of a few agents up to hundreds. We do that in multiple countries, and I think really what we're trying to drive for a customer service operation is the ability for them to personalize engagement with customers, and for them to innovate the customer service operation that they're running. So potentially to differentiate against their market competition, but it's really to drive that personalization, and we're doing that obviously through delivery of it as a cloud-based solution.
A topic warm to my heart.
Marvellous, good to hear.
Yes, good. Okay, thank you very much for that. So actually, let's get you involved in another question before we go through. In addition to the one that you've just provided us, let's have a chat about, for you, where you are on your evolution. What is the best way for you to focus about an improvement plan? And in other words, what's the sweet spot? Is it to do with the people side of it? Is it to do with the advisors, the team leaders, the competencies? I've personally been doing some work, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, on refreshing the whole way in which those two groups interact, and the skills that you need to be good at that. Customer journeys, they're very popular at the moment. Trying to understand the outside-in experience of what we're providing, also recognizing in the multi-channel world that actually the call center is part of something probably much larger. So are you doing that kind of work? We are multi-channel. We've discussed it for goodness knows how many decades now, but we are finally in an area where that's true, and also tightly coupled into CRM. That matters a lot in terms of being able to do good multi-channel. Reporting, from spreadsheets to something else, and some of us are getting into real-time, and analytics in a speech or a text format are beginning to emerge. Is that something you're interested in, or are there things that you are also involved in that we haven't identified, and you could let us know what those things are? So let's see if we can get an overview of where most of us are focused at this point in time.
So just like to vote on that, and we'll just...
On the other category, Martin, I was in a contact center yesterday. It was only a small operation, only 10 seats, but they were handling very complex inquiries. So the ramp-up time for an agent to get up to speed across the multiple systems they were using, but also the complex inquiries was significant. It was many months.
Yeah.
So how important do you see peer-to-peer training as opposed to just that dedicated time with a team leader and a supervisor?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's crazy if we're trying to get excellence at advisor level, the vast majority of investment we put in is in that first period of the induction. It just doesn't reflect how we naturally learn, And I still think that we haven't figured out how we do our ongoing investment. E-learning has been difficult, often because you can't get it onto the screen. Those other things there. Often we haven't really got a very in-depth coaching culture. We've got a by chocolate culture, which we'll talk about later on. But you're dead right. If you've got something that is going to take you maybe 4 months to get up to speed with, how are you going to actually organize that over time? Because that's an expensive amount of money you're putting in there. And how do you actually spread that in a way that you get best productivity at the end of the day? Still something people are working on, I think.
Well, we've got the results back from our poll here. The answers are 55% advisor team level competencies, 50% customer journeys, 45% multi-channel CRM, 43% analytics, and 3% other. And for other, Glenn has said, resourcing, knowledge management, email management, speech analytics, we're trying to do everything at once. And Heather says, us too.
Okay, well that's a good guess then, isn't it, actually, in terms of what people have been focusing upon. So that, to me, also fits quite closely. So if we're trying to improve the customer experience, we're also looking strongly at the advisor, team leader relationship as well. Good. Well, that's handy because actually we're going to talk quite a lot about those things as well. Customer effort. Let's not get hung up on whether it's a better or a worse metric or anything else. I know that it's something that's beginning to come onto the radar. I just really wanted to give you a new way to think about this as a way to engage the team leader and advisor community in what the essence of customer effort is all about. And once you've got the slides, please feel free to use these as a way to get a conversation going with your guys. So, customer effort. You could talk about customer effort as being a function of what I've called upstream and downstream management. Now this is really looking again from the perspective of the customer and how much effort you are expecting them to put in relative to the task they want to achieve. And if you look at the very worst version of that, it's the fact that we've completely screwed up, we haven't done a good job, and we've got the customer to the point where they're severely irritated. Either that has resulted in them taking us to court, which thankfully isn't very often, or, and this is an up-and-coming trend, actually we're so incensed by that organization that we have gone away and we have probably mustered our own gang and we're attacking that organization online and trying to precipitate a form of social crisis. It doesn't happen much, but there are signs when that happens. So I would consider that to be your end point. Right? You really don't want it to get any worse than that. It doesn't often happen, but that's the full stop at that end of the upstream, downstream management cycle. The next one is unfortunately still quite popular and quite common, is complaint management. And again, that's obviously a function of customer effort. I didn't really want to complain. I wanted to get something sorted out. Something hasn't worked. There's been a breakdown of communication. It's risen to a complaint. Now we're starting to move into more business as usual. Whether this is good or bad is another discussion, but our ability to resolve the issue. I think I'm right in saying that the average first-time resolution is considered to be around 70%, 75%. The last couple of surveys I've seen.
Yeah, of that order, I would say.
It's of that order. I mean, I don't quite know how accurate that measurement is. That's another conversation. But if you look at it from this point of view, we're saying that a quarter, on average, of people who engage with us are going to have to be spending more than one go at getting that thing resolved.
I think it's one of those percentages where the average is somewhat misleading because you get some companies that are very good at it,
yes,
and some that are very
serial offenders.
So it's one of those where the standard deviation is actually quite wide on the and actually is almost like a double peak graph.
Yeah. I understand that. And I think very closely associated with second time, more than one resolution is multiple transfer. That can happen again. So that, I would say, is all downstream in terms of customer effort. Moving onwards from that is probably where most of the industry likes to focus. First time resolution, we saw that, somebody was talking about that earlier on, as being a way to actually help customers in terms of having ease of engagement and interaction with us. But the name of the game actually gets better than that in today's world. And something we were talking about earlier this week, and we're going to talk about again, is that you can personalize the way in which you engage people by recognizing their situation. And this is something that actually matters a lot in today's world. There is a whole, in fact, very interestingly, was it this morning? The EU has just published something about data protection. And they have said to Google in particular, there is a notion called the right to be forgotten. Yeah.
Well, there was a legal case reported on
and
Monday.
They have just ruled, actually, that has gone through.
Yeah.
And Google is considering its position. And what that actually means is they are no longer allowed, if you submit the request, to necessarily always link you and your profile back to a situation. Yeah, and it came out of an individual who had done something and just, they wanted to move on, and they didn't always want to be associated with that. So that is another indicator of the balance relatively between who you are is publicly available to one and all, governments, agencies and organizations, versus the individual pushing back. And it's a moot point. It's going on. But if applied with some intelligence, it can be applied in this context. In other words, you've collected tons of data about me already. Why don't you use that so you recognize me and make my life easier? We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Then there's another version of that where actually I don't even need to call in. I've actually proactively recognized an imminent situation. I don't know, you're about to become overdrawn. I know some of the banks do this rather well. And if you submit to that particular SMS feed, they will let you know that. The theory being is it's going to save me money.
Yep.
You know, at the end of the day. So there's all of those, and that proactive. And I think that's actually when we see all of those sort of headlines coming through, and you've got quite a few, I think, on your site, John T. You know, proactive customer care. What does all that mean? What I think we're increasingly talking about is trying to recognize a customer situation before it's finally unfolded and reduce that effort involved as a result of that. And it's all about using data intelligently. And then, of course, there's the Amazon zone of life, which is let's get rid of the problem entirely. You know, let's remove it. So that, for me, is a way to get people to think about where we sit. And there's a number of things you can do with that. So practically, I just wanted to run through that. If you get into this idea, here's an idea. First of all, why don't you consider each of those categories to be a bucket and see whether or not you can work out how many at any given time you've got in them. If you could actually do it real time, it would be fantastic. You could see the drift of that. But if not, just as a single exercise, it would be quite interesting to work out what the average cost of each of those items is. I mean, obviously, litigation is quite clearly, you know, a huge cost. How expensive is a complaint on average in terms of processing it? You know, interesting. How expensive is first time versus multiple times? How expensive would it be to communicate to 25% of people about an imminent situation and then take 20% of inbound traffic out of the loop as a result of that? So it starts to get quite interesting because as soon as you put money involved, people take attention, you know. And then, of course, what you do with that is you actually say the name of the game here is let's see if we can move as much of the traffic as we can from the right-hand side across to the left-hand side. And I don't know who mentioned gamification, but we could play a game around that. We could incentivize that. You could give a senior team leader or off-site manager a job of actually moving the dial. You know, it's what we already do, but it's just a way of visualizing that in a more dynamic kind of a way.
And with things like the World Cup comes up, ideal time to put a bit of gamification into the into the contact center from a whole range of different ones. We had an article this week on 3 games to play for the World Cup in your contact center. So
I'm sure you're going to have lots to advise us on that when that comes through. And then the other thing is, I mean, here's a wild idea. If you get enthusiastic about this thing, how about this? Figure out what would have to be done in order to remove the need for 50% of inbound. You know, one of the things that's always interested me about systems thinking, and John Seddon on that, is he starts off from a position going, why does inbound traffic exist? And I always think that's a great question, you know, because if we run a call center, we don't think about that. We just think about resource, you know, efficiency, optimization and stuff, but we don't necessarily get, why is that there in the first instance? So it's quite a challenging exercise, you know, to actually put people in a room and say, let's, for the sake of discussion, imagine we can kill 50% of inbound by transferring it into self-service. What would it take for us to do that? Really challenging, interesting thing. You could put that into one of your quarterly, you know, sessions. Anyway, so there you go. That's some ideas around of customer effort. Anybody want to add to that, make a comment on that? Mark, what do you into all of that stuff? Does that grab your attention?
It does, yeah. I mean, I would have thought for any contact center, that's probably a big project to take on. So in terms of, would you suggest doing that in a small sort of subsection within a particular operation to analyze that kind of information?
Yeah.
So, you know, projected annual.
You need that well focused in.
Yeah.
You definitely do. Interestingly, yesterday I was at a conference 2 days ago, and Frank Larson was on the blower from New York, and he's of course the granddaddy of Twitter customer service, working over at Citibank. And he made a really interesting point the way he teed it up, and he said, look, you cannot do social unless you have transformation as a key objective. In other words, as it scales, you will die in terms of the amount of volume unless you think about how do we take that away.
Yeah.
And build that into the proposition. And you've got to say that we as customers engage more with organizations than ever before. So there's a cost associated with that. So you do need some discipline in this kind of way to say, let's get rid of all the unnecessary stuff. Let's get as smart as we can, and let's just focus on the value add part of that, where we could monetize it, we could build loyalty, we could get more brownie points as a result of that.
And how many people would you involve in that sort of initiative? I mean, we're discussing how to remove 50% of your call volume.
Well, that particular one, I would probably do that as my typical sort of site manager level and senior people with some representatives. But the middle idea sitting in there, let me just go back there, is actually I'm a big fan of using advisors. Certainly the work that we've done on performance and quality. I'm sure a lot of other people know this anyway, but if you really engage people well, advisors are the best form of analytics you've got. I mean, I call them organic analytics. I mean, they're listening every single day to those issues. And if you tap into that in a smart way, they can give you a ton of answers. And in answer to that question, they know better than anybody else where you're being stupid. Now, the issue they've got is probably they've tried to tell you that before, and you've gone, yeah, and nothing ever happens, so they don't tell you any longer. So you've got to tap into that again. But trust me, they are the place where you learn fastest.
So that's setting up a mechanism for them, for advisors to be able to give you that feedback.
All the time. And that's actually, well, we're moving into another space, but what we're talking about tuning up here. But really, in addition to delivering service, they really, ideally, should be commentators with you on continuous improvement. That's a highly motivating idea as well. And they have a tremendous amount of feedback. Even if you have fantastic analytics, you still need the human observation in there, and the advisors are ideally placed for that. So you could really play that game in a fun way.
Yeah. So talking of games, Glenn's obviously watched the TV show Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And says perhaps we need to invent a game of phones.
Hated that. Hated that. That's a great idea. Love it.
So what's your second of your...
Okay, so self-service. Let's have a chat about this. Self-service, there's tremendous focus upon that. Huge markets get overexcited about it simply because they get terrified by the amount of live. And unfortunately, multi-channel hasn't also given them what they was hoping it would be lower cost to delivery. Now, let's try and make self-service work. By the way, we as customers would prefer self-service in many respects. We want to do it whenever we want to do it in our own time, in our own context. So why is it not generally so well used? And the answer is it's not engaging. And here are some ideas about how it should be engaging. And so the first point I want to make is actually the typical FAQs that you see in a service site are text-based. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because actually it's very easy to scan text and you can discover quickly and navigate. However, we are living now in an increasingly visual world. It is no coincidence that Instagram, Vine, Pinterest, they have grown exponentially in this last period of time because we are now visually based. There's such amount of data out here. So have a think about reorganizing it, and the thing you can see on your screen now is, I think, indicative of this change. So readwrite.com, you might not know it, but it's actually one of those very large, very successful sites, primarily focuses on tech, emerging trends and everything, and has a huge amount of breaking news that happens. And probably now about 9 to 12 months ago, they changed the whole look and feel. And the way that you consume, or I should say, observe the content is through this simple process they've got of pictures, small amounts of teaser text, and if you go down the site, there's probably 50 of those that you can see at any given time. And the thing that they've got there to draw you in is an original graphic. It's no iStock stuff. It's all probably originally done, really interesting. The headlines, it's all good stuff that makes you feel, oh, that's quite interesting, and then a small teaser. And I wonder whether or not that sort of approach, again, might get a certain type of customer more interested in self-serve.
Yeah. Would you, although this looks incredibly simple, I imagine it took a lot to put it together and make the most relevant and interesting items visible on the front of that page. So is there a risk of making self-service in this particular way frustrating for someone if they don't get the right piece of information first up?
Well, again, I think the trick of self-service is navigation more than anything else in search. So I don't know that I'm necessarily saying visual takes over entirely. It may be people, again, prefer the, just the text stuff. But what I do know is that a lot of people, particularly the younger folk, get absolutely turned off by text. They're not going to engage with the page, and then they're going to try and phone you or email and go live again.
And I can't recall seeing an FAQs page that had any pictures on it.
No.
Great idea, Martin.
No.
Great idea.
And again, if you go back one, by the way, on the short video, and again, I've said it about Vodafone, a number of people have now got in-house video teams where they are showing how to do something. Obviously, you would take snapshots of that and present it in that kind of way as well.
Yeah, I think videos are great.
So on that basis, that's one idea. The second idea is that knowledge, self-service knowledge, ought to be made visible at the point of original search. Because in fact, if you talk customer journey, you will find that most people do not begin their journey in your queue. They actually begin their journey online, probably searching for it. So the issue is this: how visible has that content become to the search engines, such as Bing, such as Google? And you've really got three things here. Ideally, what you want is, once they've keyed in however they express it, it becomes immediately available above the fold, as Jonty was saying. It's a direct link to the right topic. Now that's the ideal thing that you have there. That's absolute precision, right? That's first right time, they're likely to consume it, likely to be happy, it's going to work. The next thing, which is a bit more sloppy but not so bad, is that you get directed to at least the right place in the web, and then you've got to do a separate activity around of where the hell is the item. And by the way, that can quickly grow into frustration if you can't find it at that point. And then the last thing is, it's just not even featured. Now, sitting behind of that is, of course, the ability to be recognized by Google. And I don't know whether this is really teaching you to suck eggs, or this is something that you just don't have as a skill, particularly strongly within traditional contact center environment. But the whole business of how you SEO is worth thinking about as far as knowledge is concerned. And what I've provided you with here is a simple piece of best practice, which is actually to do with videos, but the principles here are pretty much common for any form of information. And they are saying some key things which are worth knowing about. For instance, what you're trying to do is replicate the way in which the customer is likely to have put in that particular request into the Google box. That's the key thing. That's where you go searching for keywords, and you find out the most common way of asking questions about that probably doesn't reflect at all the way you'd title it, and then you actually start to make sure that those words are represented in all the descriptions. Interestingly, even as far as the title is concerned, putting the title at the beginning of what you name it as has a slight benefit. And so you get these things like, I always write, for example, social customer service, : the latest update. And that just gives you a slight advantage. As far as description is concerned, use the keywords as many times as you can without word stuffing, and make sure that you write extensively, because as the advice here says, Google, YouTube cannot listen to a video. It's dependent upon your descriptions. And I've actually personally experienced this. I did a video for the book, and I bothered to follow this advice funnily, and I went literally 48 hours straight to the top of the page on social customer service, simply because I bothered to actually index correctly everything about the video.
So you put a transcript in, was it, or just a summary of it?
No, it's just I didn't even get to the transcript level. No, absolutely. It was just full-blooded description that was relevant with the title, and then I went up the page, because clearly most people that produce all those YouTubes just don't bother to do that kind of stuff. And then the final thing is an interesting point, and that is that usage is one of the things that Google ranks very high, because it seems to indicate that the content is valuable. It's a good proxy. So therefore, the more times that the thing has been viewed, the more likely Google is to put it up the list. So proactively, you might build a workflow that says, whenever we produce new video content in this particular case, what we will do is actively promote that by the advisors to get usage up in order to drive it going further up the page, or you might preview it at the front page of even the website, I don't know, but you recognize the fact that you need to give it an initial boost in terms of viewing in order, and apparently Google reckons that they discount anything which is less than 40% viewed. So interestingly, you do need genuine people to look at it rather than gamify it. I even found some websites where you can get it artificially viewed, but apparently that cheats it. So anyway, so there's a little bit in there, but it's an interesting point about knowledge, making sure that it's available.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as that's concerned. And then, just really sort of moving beyond that particular idea, is this: could we actually push out knowledge to customers based upon the fact that we have analyzed regular types of questions which come into the call center? We recognize that they are popular. We have turned them into self-service. Or actually we just go to the self-service and we analyze what's popular and say, look, by definition, more customers of that type would be interested in this. And if you can segment customers in that way, you could potentially be proactively communicating something that they should experience as being highly relevant, and therefore remove the need for them to interact with you. And again, that's just a mindset thing more than anything else. So can inbound topics be grouped by customer segment? If so, can others in the same segment be proactively messaged? All right. So there's some booster ideas around of self-service.
Indeed.
Yeah. Excellent. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, I've always found FAQs slightly frustrating because I think that the reason that I have a question is that my inquiry is unique. It inevitably isn't, but I feel I need to speak to someone or get some further information on it. So I think the videos, I'd find incredibly useful.
Yeah.
But if not, I tend to pick up a phone or use web chat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult, and if you look actually at FAQs on YouTube, you can quite clearly see they're not very often used, which is tragic, really.
Yeah.
So I think it's about the visibility and the signposting and the promotion of that stuff, because.
Well, I think, in an average contact center, you might be, responding to a couple of thousand emails a day.
Yeah. And
your FAQs page, at most, might be 100.
Yes.
So I think there's a big disconnect. You've got lots of actually, questions and answers you're doing every day. Why can't we get more of those onto the website? Vetted, are they still valid? Review it after a year. And get
well, that's why I've done the upstream, downstream, because I think we need a much more aggressive approach to that, because we tolerate it. I mean, how much of that inbound traffic really needs a live human being answering that over and over, And if we could find a way to package it up in an acceptable way, promote it so people could find it, everyone's got to win from that.
Emma, we're going
to... I've just got a quick question. Do you ever find, though, that sometimes when you're looking for a particular question, you've got a specific question you're looking for in FAQs, I've got a particular company in mind, I'm not entirely sure I should mention it, but they send you on a circular loop. So you go into one FAQ and you find half an answer, and then you have to click somewhere else, and it just gets so tedious, you give up and you call.
Oh, no,
and then you're twice as annoyed as well, aren't you?
Yeah, totally agree. One thing I don't... okay, here's a promo. I think we need to have more UX designers in contact centers, yeah? Because we don't think enough about what's it going to take for me to have that task achieved. And that's absolutely classic example. It's probably been designed for a perfectly good reason, but hasn't been experienced, like IVR. It's the old conversation.
Right, we've got a poll up now, which is how much more live inbound could you convert to self-service? And this isn't necessarily self-service just over the phone. This is self-service on the phone or on the website. So the answer is, if you'd like to vote now, 0 to 4%, 5 to 9%, 10 to 19%, 20 to 29%, and 30% plus. Mark, which ones do you think is going to be the most common one of those, do you think?
10 to 19%, I'm going to say.
Oh, I don't know if you're viewing the reflection in my glasses, but actually, that actually is
there we go. I'm pretty pleased with that.
That one actually just shot up very much the last minute there. So yes.
Do you know what though? If people actually did that, that would be transformative.
Yeah.
I mean, but think about what the cost to serve would be if that was actually achieved.
Yeah, and it's quite fascinating. 1/5 of the audience reckon you could get rid of over 30% of contacts. So that's the homework for today.
Yeah.
Since it's revision time, is an essay on how you might be able to.
Checks in the post, please.
How you might be able to do that in your own organisation.
Okay, just for fun, I tell you what, if you could give me a tentative view on what that would save you, we'll try and add up the numbers at the end. That would be really fascinating to know actually how much could be redirected to more value add. Yeah, that's a lot of money in there.
Do you think from a self-service perspective that with the advent of more flexible technology, so CRM, Salesforce, that because you're able to access the data on an individual customer more easily, you're able to offer more personalized self-service, and therefore we might see within the contact center industry across different channels an increase in that, in that as a particular way of servicing inquiries?
Well, to answer that, I think another thing that's going to help us a lot on self-service is to make sure that we get the relevant bit of information easily to the customer.
Yeah.
And I think mobile, I haven't put it in this presentation, is an absolute killer on that. Because if you've seen visual IVR, which is fascinating, where actually the IVR doesn't really work as an auditory medium, funnily enough. You've got to listen and wait until the right option comes up. But when you sit on a mobile device and you can scroll up and down, suddenly, rather than it being an irritant, we experience it as being an empowerment. We can choose. So if you go down and imagine, how IVR works, till eventually you get, that's the topic, the subtopic, and the actual thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is that's a workflow. And so therefore, if you hang just the relevant self-service knowledge at the end of that very specific topic, guess what? You're going to increase the likelihood of that working for the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how you actually therefore deliver a more personalized thing. So I think to a degree, mobile, where are we now? 79% of us have got smartphones in the UK.
Indeed, yeah.
I still don't think we know how many people actually phone us over a smartphone, which is an interesting thing. If we were to deliver service in that way, transformative.
Right, we're going to jump to some top tips and questions from the audience. Got a comment in from Ryan who says close to 50% of our inbound calls are customers inquiring about their order status. There's a big cost to answer these, and they're seemingly easy inquiries that could be turned into self-service. So it could be quite an interesting one. Let's have a look, if you can pop the up on your screen, Martin. A tip from Pam says, management team took a pie in the face if a call center goal is met. Quite fun. The representatives absolutely loved it. So,
hey, I love that. That's great.
That's a sort of back to the floor with a difference, isn't it?
Hey, that's great.
Michael says, we focus very greatly on providing a personalized sort of service. We empathize with our clients' predicament. They phone us regularly, and they know our agents. We're going to be talking on personalization just after this, this little break.
Yes.
Send out monthly FAQs to account admins in order to address the top questions received by centers. I like that one, Mark.
Works. That works. Proactive,
That's a good one. Good. We encourage patience, good manners, and courtesy when dealing with callers. We've got an opinion from Heather, says we're a pensions industry. Implementing self-service is not the easiest. Certainly, I've been looking at self-service on some of the pensions I've dealt with. Some of the pension companies, very clumsy and very cumbersome. I don't know quite why it's so difficult to get that one.
I mean, I think, I take the point, by the way, that self-service is only going to work with regular and low complexity topics, all right? And if you happen to be in a market where it's occasional engagement and it's complex, self-service will not be a primary driver for you.
Emma 9 says that it's different from the Emma we've got in the room. Project focus groups is always a good one. Gets advisors involved and gives them some ownership.
Ticking the box.
Good traction on that one. Christina says, recognizing the value of your advisors. They're not switchboard operators. They have a wealth of knowledge and skills quite unmatched.
Yes.
We're in higher education. Advisors have expansive knowledge of all undergraduate and postgraduate courses. Heather says, don't forget to thank your support areas and the management team. Often focuses on the direct customer contact, and senior management forget the other cogs in the machine. So reward and recognition are very certainly key, and we'll be coming on to that again later. So we're going to pass the baton back to Martin.
Thank you. Good stuff, everyone.
Starting to race away on time now.
Yes,
so
I know. I'm going to speed up.
Through some of them would be great.
Okay, so this is in the slot called Situation Has Been Anticipated, and I just want to read you out and sort of draw you into some of the opportunities sitting in there. And this is two things really. It's a mindset thing, trying to anticipate the customer situation, and a bit of tech. It's not very high tech. You guys, I think, do it very well, in the outbound product that you've got. So what about healthcare? This is interesting stuff, I mean, obviously, anybody who does appointment setting, you constantly need to remind people about that. You could actually remind people to complete prescriptions. Years ago we did this, actually, when I was in programs, and interestingly, some part of NHS paid for it. Simple idea that most of us, when we take a course of prescription, we actually stop 3/4 of the way through because we start to feel better.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what happens is we get ill again. And the cost of the NHS is enormous, so it really works to get people to complete stuff, which is an interesting idea. Utility, outage, reminder of upcoming, notice about late, all those things. Applies way beyond that sector. Again, the same idea. It always is fantastic, actually, when banks let you know that they think something fraudulent's happened and they intervene on your behalf, etc. But again, proactively updating people about loans and mortgages and the rest of it. One interesting thing about claims management, any of you involved in that space, I think it's always a difficult process for an organization to deliver on. One of the great frustrations for customers is the amount of effort we have to put in. So I really don't understand why we can't organize a claims process into a series of gated stages, and we proactively communicate once each of those stages is achieved. Again, that would chill a lot of us out if we did that kind of stuff there. Retail, simple stuff. We know stuff's ready. Why don't we do this, this, and this? Actually, we had a great example on Monday, which is what would happen if you went into a retail store, you saw something you absolutely died for, but you can't afford it. What would it be like if the retail store then told you when it was finally put into clearance sales and there was an opportunity to buy it? Yep, lovely idea.
Yeah,
that would drive
don't tell my wife.
No, I know, killer. And apparently, one of the interesting things is they've discovered this is
Unless it's heavily discounted.
Heavily. This is a good idea, by the way. If you populate email marketing, right, with all of the things in people's web baskets, shopping baskets, they have not yet bought but are still on the wish list, apparently the conversion rate is nuts.
Really?
Yeah. It's a very dangerous technique. That. Very dangerous technique. So, could I have some ideas from you, the audience, on this idea of thinking about your experience of interacting with various brands? It could be energy brands, banks, retail, insurance, whatever you want. The situation where you think, gosh, they've made me go through the hoop here, quite frankly. They could have been much, much smarter in terms of the way they engage with me. So an example of recognizing a situation that I'm in, because they already know, my situation, because they've got the information, and as a result of that, they could have done something different. So the sort of the catch line here is, if only they could have done this, yeah, based on a situation they could have recommended. And if you could put that into either the, the online one or the other chat thing, let's see if we can get a few ideas flowing through as far as that's concerned. I think actually what I'm going to do, John T, is given the time, is ask people to do that, chat away and continue if you don't mind.
So just if you would like to type that into the chat room, imagine yourself as a consumer or a situation where you've felt frustrated as a customer.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to answer the question, if they could only do or only have done something, what would that have been?
Thank you.
So if you could just type that into the chat room now. We've got Jay, Emma, Christina, Michael all taking those through, and we'll come back to those in a couple of minutes.
Lovely.
So
thanks for that. Let's move on. Mobility. Let's talk a little bit about that. Here's some research, a couple of years old now, but still I think valid and interesting, which looks at the impact of promptness as part of customer effort and customer experience. And it really shows the huge range of services that here in the UK are probably applicable wherever we are, in terms of people who will come and visit us at home to deliver services or goods. And the point about this is actually how long we get to wait. And it's interesting that we do spend rather a long time waiting for people to actually deliver those services. And the specific data that I just wanted to draw your attention to was, on average, and this may well be nationally specific, so translate that into your own cultural context out there, how long you are prepared to wait before you get seriously fed up. And roughly speaking, after about 15 minutes of waiting, 30 minutes of waiting, we lose it here in the UK. And interestingly, whatever you do after that point, you don't seriously recover the goodwill, and you're never going to get the NPS score. Now, if you examine that from the prospect of the person delivering that, they are basically representing the company on the road. You know, they're driving around and all the rest of the stuff. And you often see it. You know, first call Monday morning, starts off swimmingly, they've got a busy day, they're trying to fix, I don't know, your washing machine or something like that. And you know what? You say, could you really just help me out on the other little thing, or didn't quite get it prepared? And before you know it, they're an hour late. And it bangs on for the rest of the day. That's often, more often than not, how that stuff happens. I mean, home delivery services, groceries, must be a logistical nightmare in terms of dealing with that in terms of traffic. So, for all those good reasons, how can we try to mitigate some of that inefficiency and try to be smarter? Because as you can see on this particular slide, you know, it gets progressively worse in terms of what we will do as an organization, punishing you if you're late. And I just wanted to dwell on something that I've been talking with the new voice media guys about recently, which is the fact that they've now married up some of their outbound communication capability with CRM. And it's interesting because it means that nowadays you don't really have to feel that you've got to be in the office to have full control of your information and your comms in order to keep up to speed. And I've given you some of the screenshots which kind of give you an indication of how that's working. But Mark, I don't know if you can add anything to that to paint the picture in terms of how that functionality helps people.
Yeah, I think ultimately it helps if you've got an organization where there are people out on the road and they're sharing, or not sharing, but they're communicating with the same customers that a central operation or a contact center are engaging with. It just gives all of those different people involved in customer contact visibility of the same information, yeah, and the opportunity to update or inform a customer as to a change in, you know, delivery or a change in an appointment, and they've got all of the history available to them through their smartphone, their iPad, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I think it just really helps drive that single view of the customer and then the personalization that follows from that single view.
Yeah. So we're really talking to organizations that have got a more complicated customer journey. You know, people are representing it real time out there, and how do they communicate back with people at base?
Absolutely.
And we have the answers to the earlier question up on the screen now. Okay, so I'll just pop those up. In fact, what I'm just going to do is going to pop the chat room up on the screen. Christina said, if only they could listen. Joe says, if only my car dealer would notify me by email when it needs various services like an oil change or rotate towels. I actually did get one of those from my car dealer. Unfortunately, I'd done 6,000 miles over the service limit by the time I'd emailed it to me.
And you were in a lay-by.
Mike says, tell me not to go to a website as I'm calling in from it already.
Yes.
Emma, think outside the processes sometimes. Gideon, listen, not just go through a tick sheet and mark the boxes. Jay said, I need that too. Luckily, my car reminds me. I wish they could have personally talked to me how they are as a person and would like to be treated, not thinking as an employee.
Yes.
Talk to me without worrying about average handling time.
Yes. Yeah.
If only they could read. I'm not joking. I submitted an extensive email detailing my query. Frederick says, if only the technical support department and my network operator could see my phone number when I call them instead of me having to repeat that again. That's quite a basic, quite a basic one there. If they could only contact me from time to time to ask how things are. I've got some minor niggles with my Sky TV, and it would have been great to have a courtesy call, so I think that's the proactive. Rachel has said, when I give my account number and then go through chances, I finally reach a person or the right part of the IVR, I have to put the number in again. I hate that. So a couple there on tuning up the IVRs needs to be done. What else have we got? One of the banks I do business with phoned me every 2 or 3 days to keep me informed regarding an incorrect billing until it was resolved. That was fantastic.
Very good.
So
very good.
Some great ones there. So if we put back to you, Martin, and you'd like to take
well done, everybody. I thought that was inspiring stuff. That was very good.
Methods.
That's very good. Right. Let's go back into our next section. Recognition. I've done some work recently with folk on performance and quality, and as part of that whole journey, it was a 6-month journey, we got into a discussion around of how do you motivate people in terms of improving quality? And of course recognition came up as part of that discussion. And I just wanted to, quickly give you a sense of what these folk had been up to. We actually got took 16 people through a accreditation process, and right in the center of that discussion was a thing that really Dan Pink, some of you may know, inspired, which is that actually most of us are not motivated by money, we're motivated by other things if it's anything more than just a mechanical task. So things like purpose, mastery, autonomy are actually the things that tend to drive us. So I just wanted to go through a pretty simple flow, if you want, a piece of psychology. And the argument here is you really do want your team leaders to be comfortable at both explaining this, understanding this, and being able to execute this. This is what I'm really talking about here. Should be common practice rather than occasional practice, right? So clearly purpose. This is all to do with sweeping brushes and going to the moon. Stuff, what are you actually there for? How well as leaders have you described what you're up to and enthused people? Because with a sense of purpose comes a sense of meaning. And actually at a human level, having meaning or not having meaning really is fundamentally important to us. It's a question of what are we going for work for and all the rest of the stuff. And funnily enough, with a very high sense of meaning and purpose, actually what gets released is energy, enthusiasm. Now the funny thing is, that's the kind of stuff that gives you the to go and make the extra mile, make the extra effort. Because in fact, if you listen out to the average call, it's mediocre, although it is well executed. It only gets to be excellent if you make that extra effort. And of course you've done that 100, 150 times all in that one session. So really you need to get people into that zone if you're going to do something great. Now that's all about expenditure. We need to reinvest that in terms of reanimating, re-exciting people to do that, because we're organic, we're human at the end of the day. We're not just like a machine. So the point here is recognition of what people are doing actually drives people to do more. And my point about chocolate, management by chocolate, is that's a very lazy way of actually tapping into that in terms of what people are about. And that really does work. And in fact, just on the P&Q, we did that over the 6 months, and we've got so much evidence that it immediately impacts. One of the big banks, for example, in a week leapt to 65 NPS as a result of getting that psychology right. Somebody else in an outsourced business, for a client, on an A/B testing, their productivity was 15% higher than the group that had not been subjected to that particular approach. It has immediate impact on productivity and also the customer experience. So well worth doing at the end of the day. So on that basis, nonetheless, whilst that is what I would prefer to see out there, there are many other ways of doing it. So here's a quick, fun little quiz for you. What is the best way to motivate? Is it chocolate? Is it the more prescriptive things about what you can and can't do as far as empowerment is concerned? Is money, wonga, the stuff that turns you on? Is it small thank yous? Is it recognition in a more kind of fundamental way? Not necessarily asking you what you do right now, but in your ideal universe, what would be the best way? You can vote for more than one. Can you vote for more than one on this? It's only one, is it?
The most important of
okay, so it's the most important. The best
so,
way.
Mark, any guesses on?
I think if you empower people, you're more often than not surprised by the results you get back. So my tip for that one would be empowerment. I think I'm always amazed when I talk to agents on the phone for whatever reason. More often than not, I have a positive engagement and a decent conversation. So that's my one.
Well, let's have a look at the results. Second choice was empowerment. Recognition, by far the biggest one. Perhaps the biggest surprise, bearing in mind how many contact centres use it, is chocolate or sugar to motivate people. I guess it wears off after about 30 minutes. So,
okay, good. We're all on board for that one. That's fantastic. And then really, we've got now to our end of session. Actually, we've gone through our 5 ones there. So
what we'll do is, we're going to come back to me now, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some questions and some top tips from the audience. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put the webcam back on while we're doing all of this. So let's have a look through. We've got a couple of tips that came in that I've on the topic of food, actually, because I thought it was quite interesting. Motivation for our group. Food works well as a motivator, says
Yes.
Mike. A piece that we found that enhanced the effort the most was the management team personally cooked and delivered the food to the agents and support staff. Nothing fancy, but a breakfast of pancakes and sausage, which is good. That's a very French breakfast, that is, galette saucisse. Another was a grilled lunch. The folks have frequently asked for it to be repeated, which is great. Another back to the floor there.
But you see, that's actually, to me, not actually about food. That's about recognition and care.
It is.
That's what that's about.
I think that's about putting the putting
And
the
management taking time.
That's what it's about.
Jay said we've converted our break room into a restaurant with catered lunch. Management served as waiters and servers, seating associates at the tables and taking orders. I put on my tux and served as the maitre d'.
So we're either throwing pies at them or they're serving it up.
So yeah, again, it's not necessarily about the food there. And another thing, we had a circus theme day where everyone was encouraged to dress up and had managers provide popcorn, cotton candy, and ice cream. This proved to be such fun that even our client's senior management team attended the most recent activity.
Some dressed as clowns.
Some dressed as clowns.
Love it, love it, love it.
So a bit of a pun overall. So a few more tips from the audience. Make sure that at least one relevant FAQ issue is published right next to your phone number.
That's clever.
On your website.
That's clever.
Just make sure the issue can be changed quickly based on input from the reps. So if there's a trending theme, that's quite a smart one next to the phone number. Eliminate internal red tape to accomplish a client goal. Yes, we probably, government are quite big on eliminating that, or so they say, but we probably don't do enough of that in our own contact centres. Michael said the biggest single impact I've ever had on anyone at the call centre was made by the energy I conveyed when I entered the office in the morning. My boss is the same, and that energy filters down throughout the company. Practice kindness as a company policy, and your agents will be more prepared to engage with their callers and deal with their problems. This stands to improve the overall customer experience.
The example that is set by the people that they relate to as leaders filters right the way down, which is what Michael said there. Absolutely on the money. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, let's have a look. Another one up your street, Mark. Self-service is powerful, but don't discount the reality that some of your customers will always prepare to talk to someone, especially if they believe that interaction adds to the value of their experience with you. So don't neglect your culture. I know you're a great believer in voice as being the sort of forgotten channel as everyone's getting into web chat and email and so on.
Well, I thought one of the points that one of the audience made around giving a call back after you've delivered a service or delivered something is incredibly powerful as well. I know that in talking to people, friends of mine that have bought things online and then had a courtesy call to make sure it had been delivered correctly, they immediately felt some sort of affection towards that brand. So I think that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else have we got? Work hard to get your board fully engaged in what you're doing. Invite them to visit and listen in and see what restraints you're working over. So I think the back to the floor seems to be quite a common theme coming through.
It's a good theme.
Recognize the successes. Give them power to change things. They're working close to the process, customers and agents.
Yeah.
They know and recognize the needs and the problems very fast and are able to give the best ideas. The management team should implement the ideas in the big picture afterwards.
Absolutely right.
So
Absolutely.
I think is a great one overall there. And Jay said, energy has been missing from a number of calls I've listened to recently across our organization. The way we inject energy back into the call center is lots and lots of personal attention from supervisors, coaching, team meetings, and just walking around and talking to people. So I think
reintroducing meaning.
Is a very strong area overall. So what I'd like you to do now is, in one or two words, if you could share in the chat room what you liked best about today's webinar. If you could type that into the chat room now. There's a copy of slides going to be available on Call Center Helper. So if you go to callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars, where you also find the link to watch the replay, which is the same as you've dialed in to today. So I know a lot of you do love to share these webinars, and sharing with your management team may not be a bad idea to do that. There's a few more webinars we've got in the series before we break up for our summer break, and just like to finally say thank you to our two guest panelists, to Martin Hill-Wilson from Brain Food Training. Thank you very much to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you to Mark Dunn and Emma from New Voice Media.
Thank you.
And just like to say thank you to everyone in the audience for dialing in to today, and we'll be back at next week at our normal time of 1 o'clock. Thanks very much.
Great activity today, by the way. Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone who's attended. Bye-bye. Just close down.